and welcome to the very first Crash F1 podcast. The recording date is Monday, the 14th of March. It's a very exciting moment. My name is Harry Bejamin. Joining me on the show regularly will be Crash's F1 editor, Lewis Larkam, and Formula One commentator for the likes of the BBC and Channel 4, Ben Edwards. We'll be here every week throughout the season discussing the latest goings-on from the world of Formula One, what's happening down on the ground, as well as some friendly debate on the latest breaking news too. We'd love for you to get involved as well. Any questions, do make sure you send them in. Just leave them in the comments section on the Crash F1 YouTube channel. Follow Crash F1 on socials, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and come and be a part of the conversation as well. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts. Right, that's the admin out the way, gents. Let's dive in, shall we? Because it is race week. The first round in Bahrain kicks off on Friday. F2 and F3 joining the party as well. So it's all guns blazing. And of course, we've just come off the back of 3 days testing in Bahrain. So we'll be taking a look back at testing and even trying to maybe predict a running order if we're feeling bold. Plus, some latest news on tyres, minimum car weights, and is a mirror war brewing. But it looks like F1 might also be getting another step closer to getting an American driver too onto the grid. But first, easy one to start off with, Ben. From what you've seen so far, who's caught your eye? What are you looking forward to? It's also great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. No, it's great to be here with you guys. Testing's been fascinating, of course, but of course, we also know that we don't learn a huge amount about the reality of Formula One until they get out there and race and qualify. But fascinating to see. I thought Red Bull clearly did a very good job with Max Verstappen's fastest pace in Bahrain, some changes right on that last day that seemed to work extremely well with the car. And I do think, the smiles on their faces, it was the reaction that one could see in the garage that almost gave you the story that they're in good shape. Ferrari clearly very consistent both in Barcelona and in Bahrain, doing a very solid job, and I do hope that they're up there. And interestingly, in recent years, Ferrari have often gone well in Bahrain anyway, even years where they haven't then gone on to be able to maintain that championship fight. But 2018, 2019, Charles Leclerc got his first ever pole position in Bahrain. They've had some really good history there. So the fact that they've got a good car, clearly, I think makes it pretty exciting going into this first round in Bahrain, a track that works well for them. And then there's the big question about Mercedes. And of course, we're all feeling a bit uncertain about that at the moment because, they've thrown a completely different car at us for the second test compared to Barcelona. They've clearly had a few issues with it. A lot of what we're calling porpoising, the car bouncing up and down the straights. But we know how good that Mercedes team is and how quickly they can develop things. So I'm definitely not counting them out. Not yet.
No, I think you'd have to be a brave person to count out 8-time constructors champions. But Lewis, you've just come back as well from Bahrain, so you've seen it sort of firsthand. Talking of Mercedes, they turned up to Bahrain with a side podless car, drastic differences, as Ben alludes to there. What have you sort of made, not just of Mercedes, but your general thoughts so far from what you've seen in testing?
Yeah, I have to echo what Ben said. Red Bull and Ferrari look particularly good from both tests. They've had very solid tests. Cars have run reliably, no issues aside from Perez on day 2 in Barcelona, I think, with a gearbox problem. But that aside, both teams have racked up the mileage. Ferrari have done the most out of all the teams, and I agree, they look the two teams that perhaps could be at the front of the grid, at least at the start of the season. Mercedes is a big question mark. As you say, they brought the upgraded side pods, radically different, caused a bit of a stir in the paddock. But they do seem to be having some issues getting the most out of the package. Might not be working as well as they would have hoped. Both drivers reporting that handling and balance issues too. So it's clearly all is not well at Mercedes, but again, it's hard to jump to too many conclusions considering their form in the past, how they often play this sort of song of, we're struggling, and then they'll turn up and obliterate the competition. But similar to last year, it does seem like they do have some issues to iron out, but I'm sure they will be there.
With Lewis Hamilton sort of saying they won't be in the fight for wins, it's always hard to kind of believe him when he says that, isn't it? As you say, Lewis, it's not the first time they've sung this song either. But on Mercedes, Ben, as well, it's a big year, obviously, in terms of the technical regulation overhaul, but also, they've got a new driver, George Russell. He makes this step up alongside Lewis Hamilton. We know how good George is. We've seen the talent he's been able to display at Williams, and of course his one-off appearance in Sakhir replacing Hamilton when he had COVID-19. We know he's good, but this is surely the ultimate test for Russell.
Oh yeah, but a test that he will relish. He'll love it
You
because
think? Yeah.
going up against a 7-time world champion, able to learn from him, but also to try and beat him. It's a wonderful opportunity, and George is in the right place, I believe. To do that. He's 24 years old now. He's got 60 Grand Prix under his belt. So he's got that experience, that knowledge, running with Williams, a tough place in recent years because it didn't have the performance. But you never saw him give up, did you? You never saw him, back off and think, oh, well, where I'm in the Williams, it's not going to do anything. He's always pushing. His qualifying stunning. We're still got to see whether he's got that race pace. That's going to be interesting because that consistent race pace that Lewis always has is astonishing. And it's basically what put Valtteri Bottas out in the battle over the last few years, because Valtteri had good qualifying pace much of the time, but he just never quite had that same race pace. So that's a focus for George. But I think he's a huge talent, and I think we're all going to be very excited to see how this works out. And for Mercedes, is it going to get complicated, or can they get them to work together?
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question. How do you think this is gonna play out? Because Russell, young gun, is he gonna want to be playing that supporting role for Hamilton going for the championship, or are Mercedes gonna play 50-50? If you're both in the championship, will both support you? Because Russell's coming into Hamilton's team here. There's no bones about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who wants to say that one?
Yeah. I think this one, it's going to be fascinating. They don't have a number one and number two driver, do they, Lewis? At Mercedes, they always really make the point, don't they? That it's the same for both.
Yeah, exactly. I think they'll play it the same this year. I don't see a reason to change that sort of approach. They'll see how the first few races unfold and how the championship picture starts to shape up, and then take it from there. But from what I've gauged so far, from seeing how Lewis and George are acting together, and I think it looks like their relationship could be very strong. I don't see them being any sort of potential fireworks. I think they're at different stages.
You don't see this being an Alonso Hamilton battle then?
I don't think so. I think George, to a certain extent, I can see him playing the long game at Mercedes. He knows he is their future. He knows that his time will come, and who knows, he may well outperform Lewis Hamilton this season, but if not, he knows that there will come a time when Lewis moves on, retires, and he will sort of step up and take that position at Mercedes. And I'd just be surprised if there is this sort of tension and sort of Nico Rosberg-esque, Fernando Alonso-esque sort of relationship that Lewis has. And I think Lewis is at a very different stage of his career now. He is much more relaxed. He doesn't feel he has anything to prove, and rightly so. He's 7-time world champion. He's got the records for most wins and poles. I think he's quite sort of in a relaxed mindset going into the season. And of course, George will want to be proving himself and taking the fight to Lewis. But I think this relationship will work well, and I think Mercedes probably have one of the strongest lineups on the grid for sure.
Well, we talk about strong lineups as well. Sergio Perez in the Red Bull certainly proved he could play the team game last year, especially in that Abu Dhabi finale. But Lewis, I'll come to you on this first. On Red Bull, playing the number two driver, very much is the case in that team, you have to say. But Perez has a lot of young guns in that Red Bull driver program eyeing up that seat, and Perez has obviously the most amount of experience over them all and is a very capable driver. But unlike last year, he needs to be on it from the get-go, right? He can't be coming through the field constantly. He needs to be able to be the supporting player from Bahrain, not from Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, exactly. Red Bull really need him to be up there. I mean, of course, matching what Max Verstappen can achieve is very difficult. Obviously, he's one of the best drivers in the world, and often you get caught up in the whole how far away he is, his teammate is from Max, and obviously we've seen Max outperform his teammates comfortably. So there's an element of you would expect Max to be a few tenths up the road, but certainly Sergio needs to up his game in qualifying. I think there'll be pressure on him this year to, if Max is on pole position or towards the front of the grid, Sergio needs to be right up there with him, because that was something that obviously last season he was spending we know how brilliant Sergio is in the race, but he was spending all of last season pretty much coming through the field, and he needs to be further up. If Red Bull were going to challenge for a Constructors' World Championship anyway, because obviously that was sort of their downfall last season, compared to Mercedes, they had the consistency of Bottas being up there with Lewis. Okay, not matching Lewis, he was some way back, as was Sergio, but getting those consistent results that were kind of missing from Perez. And as you say, there's a lot of pressure going into next season, because you've got Pierre with a point to prove at AlphaTauri. We'll see how Yuki gets on in the second season too, and obviously Red Bull have got a host of exciting young juniors coming through in F2 and F3 that, if Sergio doesn't deliver the kind of performances they expect, there could be a switch around there with either one of the AlphaTauri drivers moving up to Red Bull, and perhaps some changes there with the driver lineups at the sister team as well. So I think there is pressure on Sergio to perform this season.
Yeah, and there's Alex Albon too, isn't there? Of course. I mean, Alex is,
of course, yeah,
is still a Red Bull man, even though he's at Williams. And I think I'm really fascinated to see how that goes, because I do rate Alex very highly. And although he had a tough season alongside Max, he was, like Red Bull do so often, thrown in at the deep end and up against somebody, as you say, of Max's quality. And it was interesting hearing him speak over the test when he was doing one of his interviews about how much he learned last year, working in the background and working with the teams so much more and understanding what they need from you as a driver. I'm very fascinated to see how Alex does this year, and I hope that Williams are a bit stronger. They can really play a bit of a game in there.
Yeah, I think he'll flourish in the environment, the less pressured environment at Williams, as Russell sort of proved. I think he'll do a very, very good job this season.
Do you think he's going to be the man who comes into that Williams team to lead it? Because obviously Latifi has been there longer, but has been very much in the shadow of George. Is Alex going to come in and be the de facto team leader?
I think that Nicholas Latifi will be sort of seen as the team leader early on. He's surely got to be, given he's had 3 years at the team now. He's settled. He knows the team. Alex may take a bit of time to adjust. He's obviously had a year out of F1 too, but it'll be really interesting to see how they perform against each other, and then whichever driver sort of pushes the team forward.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about what you're saying, but it's interesting because I think Alex actually, I think he might end up fairly quickly, partly because he's bringing information from team like Red Bull in the current era, because he's worked with them in the current era, and he knows how they do things. And Williams need to learn this, because they have been a bit on the back foot for a few years. They're putting a lot of work in now to get up front. But it's a little bit like Vettel going to Aston Martin. He brought, I talked to some of the guys that were either Force India or Racing Point. Vettel brought so much information in about how things were done at Red Bull. I mean, he obviously didn't have the engineering knowledge to say, well, this is how you should design such and such, but the sort of the way that things are done, and Red Bull are so brilliant at, working on a car, bringing updates, all this sort of stuff. I think Alex can bring some of that information. I think that actually will be very valuable to the sort of new look Williams. Yeah.
It's certainly going to be exciting. Williams do look, that midfield looks massive, to be honest. It kind of rules out everybody. If we look at Ferrari and McLaren next, who are sort of maybe perhaps the last in that kind of top tier that's been emerging from testing, it certainly looks like it's going to be a packed midfield with everybody else. Let's move to sort of the Ferraris and the McLarens. Obviously a fierce battle for third last year. Ben, Ferrari, as we alluded to right at the start, everyone seems to think that They are the favourites right now. They've got strong form in Bahrain anyway, but they look like they've really got a pretty neat and tidy car here, and perhaps one of the strongest driver pairings on the grid.
Yeah, it's a good driver pairing, and at the moment there's a good relationship between them, and I hope it continues. That's what a lot of
At
people
the
are
moment,
wondering,
yeah.
whether it will continue. Villeneuve-Peroni days, they were good mates at one point, and then it all went horribly wrong. I think Ferrari are in a good position. I think clearly that car does look good. It's still very early to tell, and we have seen this in the past where Ferrari have done well in testing, and then suddenly we've all had a bit of a wake up when we've got to the actual race, and they haven't delivered as well. But there does look to me a bit of a confidence to them as a result of the 6 days of testing they've now done. That means they're going to be in that battle somewhere. I really hope so. And it would be great to see Ferrari part of it. And for Binotto, the boss, effectively the boss, Matteo Binotto, who runs Ferrari, this is a crucial stage in his career because he's now had the time to build Ferrari up for this new set of rules. In theory, he's put all the right people in all the right places. Right, this is it. This is the time now where Binotto has to prove himself because as the guy who runs Ferrari, you're always under massive pressure. He needs to deliver this year.
100%. And Lewis then on McLaren, if we move them as well, because it's a big old grid this year to get through. They look like in Barcelona, they're one of the teams to come out strong in preseason testing. And I know we'll say this many more times throughout the rest of the episode that can't read anything into testing, but what you can read into is that Bahrain did not favour them at all. These brake issues, which seemed to sideline, just Norris in the end, because of course Daniel Ricciardo missed the entirety of it, diagnosed with COVID-19. So it's all suddenly become a bit of a stressful start for McLaren, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Preseason testing started so promisingly for McLaren in Barcelona. The car looked great on track, very stable and consistent, and obviously fast with Lando topping the first day in Barcelona. And they had no real issues in Barcelona. And then obviously fast forward to Bahrain, and it's gone the other way. And the brake issues have really compromised the whole test for them. Not only obviously with Daniel Ricciardo missing out as well, being unwell and then testing positive for COVID has ruled him out of the 3 days of testing in Bahrain. It's leaving Lando Norris with a lot of work to do. And yeah, they just all 3 days really struggling with the braking. Saw Lando going off so many times, particularly on day 1 and day 2. He was running wide, locking up, struggling to keep the car on track. And yeah, definitely a setback for McLaren in the second test. They've sort of admitted that they're on the back foot going into the first race, and especially with Ricciardo missing out on mileage as well. Yeah, it's definitely a setback for them, but they do look in a good place. If they can get on top of the braking issue, that will be key. Whether or not they will be able to turn it around and fix the issue in time for the first race remains to be seen.
I wonder if Daniel's going to keep his record. I rather doubt it this time, sadly, because he didn't do any running. He's always out-qualified his teammate in Bahrain, but you do wonder how on earth he's going to do that, having had no running this week, and Lando doing all those laps.
Yeah, he's
spent a lot
definitely
of
on
time
the
in a
back
hotel
foot.
room. A
Yeah,
lot of time in a hotel
yeah.
room with the
Not
last
great.
half a year, whatever it's been, of course, with him going home to Australia. Just on McLaren, though, as well, Ben, they've announced that IndyCar star Colton Herta has been added to a test program with them because the new Formula One sporting regulations allow them to test an old car, or a 1-year-old car, isn't it? So this is great news for obviously Herta, but also he's been bubbling around the last couple of months, hasn't he? Because there's Andretti were rumored of buying Alfa Romeo, and now they want to bring their own team in. And there's this big push, especially with another American Grand Prix on the grid, on the calendar as well, to get an American on the grid. Is Colton Herta the natural person next? And what an opportunity to get.
Yeah, I mean, he is a real talent. I've watched IndyCar and I've seen him in action, and he has a lot of talent. But I do think that going into Formula One from IndyCar is a big shift, and I think it will be quite tough. But I'm glad he's got this opportunity to do some testing and to really understand Formula One, not being sort of thrown in at the deep end straight away and going racing. Because he has a lot of natural ability and would learn very quickly. So I think it's great. We would love to see, I mean, I would love to see a US driver in Formula One again. It's been a while since we've seen it. And as you say, with Miami now coming on the calendar, Austin getting the biggest crowd of last year, in Texas. It's great to see that growing interest in Formula One in the States, and it would be lovely to have a US driver, as I say. So I'm really glad to see this, but whether he's going to be the one who ends up in Formula One or not, that's another question.
The ultimate question, perhaps. All right, then. Well, those are sort of the kind of the teams we expect to be at the top. But then there's this huge midfield battle, it looks like, where